can't believe it. You're looking at this big fireball, people screaming, calling out for help.
As soon as we walked in the door, we encountered our first victim that had been severely burned. And you get that smell of a victim. It's more of a taste than it is a smell.
That September day, were you in the yard with your wife and children, or working on some stage play? Did you stand there in shock at the sight of that black smoke rising against that blue sky? Did you shout out in anger and fear for your neighbor, or did you just sit down and cry?
Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve.
Thoughts about 9/11?
So 9/11, I was 21 years old. I was still in college. I worked for the Razorback basketball team. We had practice that morning at 5:30, and we got done about 7:30 or 8. And went and took a shower, and then I was driving back to my dorm room, and we didn't have cell phones, or we really didn't have computers back then. So on the radio, we had radio in our car. All the radio stations were taken over by news alerts that there had been 2 planes that ran into the Twin Towers in New York, and that they had heard that it was the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. And so we got back to my dorm, we turned on the TV, and all the videos were there. And, they ended up shutting down the University of Arkansas, which was crazy because they never shut down college. They sort of put us on, not lockdown, but everybody just stayed where they were. And then the next plane hit. You had one hit the Pentagon, then you had one that crashed out in the middle of a field in Pennsylvania.
Are you on September 11th, 2001?
I was at home. I was getting ready to go to work. I was a receptionist at Devil's Den State Park. And my daughter was on the bus on her way to school. And just by the time I started to walk out the door, they made the announcement that a plane had hit the first tower, the Twin Towers.
I was actually teaching kindergarten in Prairie Grove, and I had gone down to the office to get a cup of coffee, and the secretary said something about it's terrible about that plane crashing, and then I went in the library to watch it on TV, and right as I walked in, the second plane hit, and so things got really scary after that.
I was in my kindergarten classroom. I didn't teach here in West Fork at the time, and I was in my kindergarten classroom, and I saw some teachers like scurrying around, and they were like, we had TVs in our classroom at the time, and they said, turn on your TV, and so we did, and as soon as we did, we saw the images of the towers and the planes and the smoke.
My most vivid memory about that day or that whole time period was when we came back the second day. I was teaching second grade then, and I just remember the kids being worried and confused about what was going on. They had watched the TV. Every time they replayed the airplanes going into the towers and the towers falling down, they thought it was a new building. So they thought the whole world was coming down. So it was, it just broke your heart to think that that's what they were going through, that's what was going through their mind the whole time. Everybody wanting to be with their family, everybody wanting to help each other out, but we were all so confused and so worried about what was going to happen. And just trying to comfort those kids and make them realize that hopefully this was the only thing that was going to happen and we'd make it through was our goal that day.
So I was actually an 8th grader. I had just gotten out of choir, gone to PE, when our PE coach had actually told us to get dressed back into our street clothes. We were watching the news about the World Trade Center towers being struck.
Where were you when the event took place?
I was in England. We were stationed on an Air Force base, and so we were living in off-base housing.
How old were you September 11th, 2001?
I was in 2nd grade.
I was in Kansas. I grew up in Kansas, in a town called, we called it at the time, Arkansas, or Kansas City, not Arkansas. And I was actually in my living room when it happened.
I, at the time, was working at the university, and I was on my way to work, and I heard an announcement over the radio that morning that a plane had hit the World Trade Center, and it was just the first plane. I actually thought they were doing like some morning prank. You know how those morning shows do silly stuff? So I didn't think it was real. And then when I got to work, everybody was talking about it, and we went into our break room at work and turned the television on, and we were watching when the second plane hit. And that was pretty devastating because you could see it coming. You knew what was fixing to happen. And so I was at work, and we didn't do any work for the rest of the day. We all sat in our break room and watched things unfold. We saw the Pentagon get hit, and then we heard about the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, and it was pretty devastating.
Specifically where I was in my second hour Ancient Medieval Cultures class when I found out about the attacks. Coach Clark was teaching that class, and he stopped. We were taking a test that day, and he actually stopped the test, and we turned on the TV because we had cable in every classroom. And then the next period, third hour, I was in Mr. Cochran's English class when I watched both of the towers fall.
Like I said, I was actually at a conference, and I walked out and the news was on, and we got to seen the plane actually fly into the first Trade Center. Yeah.
I was actually 2 doors down. I was teaching 3rd grade. It was my 2nd year of teaching, and one of the 3rd grade teachers that actually was in this room came down to my room and knocked on the door and told me, standing out in the hallway, that her husband had just called her and said that the World Trade Center had had 2 planes fly into it, and one of the towers had fallen already, and that the Pentagon had also been hit. And I remember her saying, it's Armageddon. And I also remember thinking, I don't know what the World Trade Center is, but you know, I knew that it sounded bad. And then there weren't any, like, we had desktop computers, but we didn't have computers around a lot and TVs around a lot. And so actually the library teacher took all the kids out onto the playground, pretty much the whole elementary, all the kids that were left in the elementary, she took out on the playground because everybody was going to the library to watch the TV because there was a TV in there. And we actually went across the hall and they had a TV in that room, in the special ed room at the time, and we sat in there and watched the events unfold until the end of the day. It was a sad and crazy day.
In 2001, this is Mr. Parks here. I was in 11th grade, and I had marching band first thing in the morning. So I got off the bus. It was pretty soon before I started driving to school. Got off the bus, went to the band room, got my marching euphonium out of its case, went out with the rest of the band and practiced our marching show for that first hour. It was a regular Tuesday morning in September. It was sunshiny, it was pretty warm, got all hot and sweaty. And then and I had no idea that while I was practicing out with the band, stuff was happening already. After band practice, went to the band room, put my horn up, walked to English class. And I came in, and back in those days, there were TVs mounted in every room. So the TV was on, and all I could tell was there was this big hole in some big skyscraper in some city somewhere. And we thought it was an accident. Like, wow, did a bomb go off in a building or something? What's going on here? And we learned that a plane had hit the building.
I was living in Hawaii. So, and I had just started teaching that first year. It was the first year I was teaching, and my wife woke me up at real early in the morning, probably 5 o'clock in the morning, because she said someone had flown a plane into the towers in New York. And my first thought was, you turned on a movie this morning somewhere, and that didn't happen, because it was not easy to believe. So,
what was your first thought after hearing what happened?
That things were going to get really rough for Hawaii, because especially when they started saying things about all the airplanes were being grounded, because everything comes in and out of Hawaii on an airplane. All the people come in and out and everything. So, my wife was still in the military at that time, and she had to take off to work. We were living in a military housing unit, and you could hear all up and down the street people, going into work. Yes.
I remember that the first plane crashed when I was still at home, because school started at 8:30 in the morning for me, and when I got to school, the second plane had hit. So all day long, all we did was watch news coverage in our classes. Didn't do any schoolwork.
I remember that day. I remember it was a beautiful day. That's kind of weird, but I remember it was like blue skies and sunny and just a really pretty day. And it was a Tuesday. I remember that too.
I was actually on a business trip. I was in Sandusky, Ohio, and because of that, when the planes stopped flying out, I was no longer able to get home. So we had to have somebody come and pick us up so we could get back. And on the trip back home, we got to see a lot of people lined up against the highway with American flags. The gasoline, people were at the gas stations because there was no gas. So that was one fact that I remember from that day.
Probably like a lot of people watching the towers collapse, just the chaos that went along with that, and you could just kind of feel the fear in everybody, on the television, watching them scramble around. But definitely watching the two towers, and I did see the second plane hit the second tower, so just really all of it in general. But watching the two towers collapse was definitely a memory I'll never forget. I was 29 on that day. Actually, September 11th is my birthday, so I actually turned 29 that day.
I was 16 on September 11th, 2001. I was a junior at Fayetteville High School. Well, one random detail I can remember is right after it happened, there was a scare on gas. There would be a gas shortage and everything. So, of course, as a 16-year-old kid, I didn't have any gas in my truck. So I had to try to call my parents to come pick my truck up from school to go get gas in my truck so that I could have gas to get around.
I was teaching in my second grade classroom. We were all together, normal day, we thought. Everything was going great. And then we started to hear rumors about what was going on.
I just remember it was early in the morning whenever we all found out, you know, and we all were sitting in my classroom and we were emotional and crying, and you know, people had family and friends out there, so they were wanting to check in with them, but of course it was difficult. And I can remember all of us just going, well, wait, how are we going to go on with the rest of our day? And then that changed by the end of the day, like, where does our country go from here? It was a very emotional time, and I think still is for a lot of people.
What is a random detail you remember from the day?
I don't know about a random detail. I just remember it was kind of one of those things, and I didn't watch the TV very much at that time. This was, you know, quite a while ago. Didn't before social media and all that stuff. But I remember for some reason turning the TV on and turning it on to the news. And I don't know why, because I didn't watch the news all that much. But I can't explain it. It was really weird. I'm not, you know, normally superstitious, but for some reason I just felt compelled to turn the TV on and see what was going on. And I turned it on and I saw the first tower and I was like, well, that's kind of weird. And then within a few minutes, the second plane hit. And I was like, oh, wait a second, this is something pretty. And then it was just random because I normally didn't watch TV. So I thought it was really crazy that I had this feeling to turn the TV on and watch the news to catch up, and boom, and it just happened. And I watched live as the second plane went in there. So it's kind of weird.
Remember President Bush was in Florida at the time, and he was in a classroom reading a book to kids, and he got the news, and they took him somewhere so he wouldn't get, you know, bombed or injured. You know, I just remember lots of people were scared. There was lots of hate towards Islamic people that was going on at the university. So it was just a real scary time. But then I also remember after that how the Americans came together. Like, you know, everybody was flying flags. You know, there was a big talk of just being one America and just making sure that we fight for America. Several of my people my age joined the military then, so they were like, I'm gonna go fight for America. So you know, you had lots of national pride that came out of that situation as well. But it was a scary situation for several days after that happened.
Thing I want to tell you is a couple years later, I can't remember if it was 2010 or 2011, that I got married, and I was living in Oklahoma, and I was sitting on the couch, and a news special came up, and they were like, the president's going to come in on this, President Obama, and he said there's going to be a special news something or other, and I was thinking, what could possibly be, you know, what's going on? And right before they said it, I realized, oh, they must have gotten Osama bin Laden. And what I remember specifically about that was, and I still get pretty emotional about this, I had never been so happy that someone had died. I've never wished that before. So that's how 9/11 has affected me, and what I remember of that day.